So we were just finishing up the seventh verse. I won't chant it again because we did it last time. So it was Ajadaraya Stotra Samamam Sarala Chintanam Viralataf Paranam. Sorry, Viralataf Param. So it said, better than the flow of ghee is the flow of river water. Better than spells of meditation is one continuous current thought or meditation on the Lord. So we are continuing that, just muting you all. We're continuing the section Ramana Maharishi started on, the three types of devotion, starting from what you can do with kaika, the body, which is the puja, then vachika, which you can do with the voice, which is chanting and parayana and such. And then finally, mansika, which is the only thing we call upasana. And now we're coming to the different kinds of meditation. And we made the distinction between what is preparatory meditation and what is actual Vedantic meditation. Vedantic meditation, Nididhyasana, happens after sufficient exposure to listening to the Shastra, right? After Shravanam, Mananam, then Nididhyasana comes. But before Jnanam, what is required, doesn't necessarily mean sequentially it has to be before you expose yourself to Jnanam, but sequentially, in the sense before Jnanam can start taking root, can start assimilating, you need to have sufficient amount of Chitta Shuddhi. And one of the qualifications of that Chitta Shuddhi, purity of mind, is Chitta Ekagrata, which is the one-pointedness of the mind. And for this, Dhyanam, the practice of Upasana, is highly recommended. And we extensively in the last class spoke about the most common type of preparatory Upasana which is suggested, which is the mantra-based Upasana, which is meditating on a mantra. And we also looked at what is the right kind of posture, place you should pick, timing, and and so on, right? And we also looked at what is the most common types of obstacles to meditation, which is laya, sleep, and vikshepa, the wandering tendency of the mind. Now, for most people, it is highly recommended that they have one standard practice of some kind of mantra-based upasana. That would be the easiest to keep in touch with on a daily basis. Also get initiated in one particular mantra so that you keep it as your daily practice. And as you keep getting exposed to Jnanam, keep up that practice so that one-pointedness of the mind can be developed. Then only you will be able to focus on the teaching in a way where it will really start getting assimilated so that you can get the benefits of the Jnana. Now, there are a few other types of upasanas in this category, which you could also consider. Maybe you can, if it calls to you, you could consider on a daily basis, or otherwise you could do it occasionally. So the first kind is concentration based, which we already discussed, which is that month concentrate, giving your mind something to do, like doing the japa of a mantra is one kind of upasana. Now, another kind is relaxation meditation. This, if you've been to Shivananda Ashram, you would have experienced they do this at the end of every asana class, or many other traditional yoga classes will do this, kind of a yoga nidra. So relaxation is also really important for a sadhaka. Lord Krishna also says in the Bhagavad Gita that everyone should take time for relaxation, and it is essential for a balanced life. Now, how do you do this relaxation meditation? Um, those of you who are familiar with Yoga Nidra, you can lie down in Shavasana, and which is the corpse pose, they say. So with arms and legs spread and your face upwards. And you start with the physical relaxation. So you visualize every single part of your body, and you say, and you tell yourself, yes, I'm relaxing my hands, I'm relaxing my shoulders, I'm relaxing my neck, and so on. And if you can take a bit longer to say, now I'm feeling my hands being relaxed, I'm feeling my shoulders being relaxed. If you want, you will probably find videos of Shivananda yoga teachers doing this online if you would like to check. Uh, so, and then at the next level, often in the ashram context, they might just do the physical relaxation. But for complete relaxation, it also needs to be at the mental and spiritual level, right? So you can also think of it in terms of koshas. So after you relax your Annamaya kosha, which is the body, you can go to the Pranamaya kosha, which is the breath and the mind. And how do you do this? You can focus your attention on the breath. You can focus your attention on the cool air going into your nostrils and how it feels, the warm air coming out of your nostrils. You can observe the fluctuations of the mind and try to relax the mind. It can be often helpful to do some kind of visualization. Visualize yourself somewhere in nature, in the forest, by the beach. Imagine the waves, imagine the trees and the feel of the ground and so on. And you can relax the mind in that way. Right? And finally, if you want to do then spiritual relaxation, you can also then invoke some deity or invoke consciousness itself. See yourself as this witness consciousness, witnessing the body and the mind laying in this position. So, and spend sufficient amount of time, 10 to 20 minutes. That's how you would do a relaxation meditation. Another kind is, the third kind is expansion meditation. Now, as you're getting exposed more and more to Vedanta, and you have to imagine yourself, you have to believe what Shastra says about you being this infinite consciousness itself, it helps to imagine just a bit of what is this infinitude that we're talking about. Like you can think of the whole size of the universe. In the Milky Way itself, there's millions of stars. Our sun is just one of them. And the sun suns keep exploding in the universe all the time. And it's just a small event in the big scheme of things. And out of these millions of suns, we have this one sun, and there is our one little planet Earth revolving around this sun. And on this one little planet Earth, only 25% is land, right? And then then you look at your country, which is occupying this Earth, this vast Earth, and then think of where you are in the scheme of all that. So how can you sit and do this visualization? You can do it the other way around, ideally, like you can sit, visualize your surroundings. So visualize the room you're sitting in, and then your house, expand to your neighborhood, then your street, then your area, and then the city you're in, then the state, the country, and then what's around, And as you're doing this expansion, also imagine everything which is in that, all the people, the beings, known and unknown, who are in all this space. And then keep expanding and keep expanding till you come to the whole planet Earth. And then you expand even further till you imagine the solar system. And then all the other stars which are around, to the Milky Way, and to all the other galaxies which are around. And you can keep expanding like that. This is just to start training your mind to grasp what exactly is this infinite existence that we're talking about. So an appreciation of cosmology can be very useful for a Vedantic student. That's expansion meditation. It can also be done in another way using, for example, the chapter 11 of Bhagavad Gita. If you can memorize that, it talks about the Vishwarupa Ishvara. And then if you chant it, it talks about visualizing Ishvara as the various things in existence, or something like the Vishnu Sahasranama Dhyana Shloka, right? There's various Dhyana Shlokas. Like it says, Puf Pado Yasya Nabir, um, and which means like whose feet are the earth, whose navel is the sky, and you visualize that lotus coming out of the navel, and Asura, via the, and it talks about the whose breath is the Vayu itself, and whose eyes are the moon and the sun, and so on. So there's various Dhanishlokas like this. Which of these might appeal to you? You can even memorize one of them. So the Vishnu Sahasranama one is a nice short one, which can be done if you've learned to chant it and learned the meaning. And another kind of meditation you could also do is value meditation, right? Which is absorption on the values, the qualities required for a sadhaka. How do we know which other values to cultivate? The Bhagavad Gita talks about many of them. But you don't need, or Dharmashastra talks about many of them, but you don't need to have necessarily studied Dharmashastra or Bhagavad Gita to really know what are the right values, do you? Swami Dayananda calls it common sense values. Dharma is very common sense. It's very simple. It's act on to others as you would want them to act towards you, and don't do unto others as you don't want them to do to you, right? So you can, using that framework, you can look at what are the weaknesses that I would like to work on. Maybe there is anger, maybe there is envy, maybe there is laziness, right? And you can list down all the set of weaknesses. You don't need to share that list with anyone. And you can contemplate on each of these. And as Raviji likes to say, as a Vedantian, it's very important we critique ourselves, but not criticize. In the end, you are Brahman, so you cannot criticize yourself. You can only critique with the objective of improving yourself based on that critique. Every time when you want to sit and do this value meditation, you can start with a sankalpa, a prayer, asking Ishvara for an opportunity to refine your mind. And you can also cultivate this more by moving along with other virtuous people, a satsanga, who helps you cultivate these habits, and avoiding dursanga, those who are taking you away from spiritual life, and doing vichara, self-inquiry, which can be done in the form of meditation. Look at every opportunity when your consciousness troubles you and you don't listen. When that happens, you're adding poison to your spiritual journey. So if you keep ignoring it, your forget spiritual evolution, your mental health will become too weak. And generally, our body gives us very subtle signals, that little prick of consciousness, a little pain somewhere. And usually the signs are very, very subtle. And it's good for us if we can learn to listen to these subtle signs. Otherwise, the body starts speaking louder and louder, right? And it becomes disease. So in Western psychology, they'll very patronizingly say psychosomatic diseases, like you're imagining this disease. But that's missing the connection that there is a mind body. Um, I mean, for the like Atman correction, right? Like there is this something much more beyond the body. These are not all there in isolation. So they all work together. They all have a particular dharma which has to be um, adhered to. And when you violate that dharma, the body, the mind will suffer, and it will not be conducive for your spiritual growth. So these are some kinds of meditation. Any questions on that? Okay, let's go to the next verse. I will chant and you can repeat after me. Please unmute yourself. भेदभावनात् सोऽहमित्यसौ
भेदभावनात् सुहृत्यो
भावनाभिधा पावनीमता.
भावनाभिधा पावनीमता.
Thank you. So this verse 9 says, verse 8 says, Veda Bhavanat. Bhavana is the attitude. Better than the attitude of thinking there is a difference. Soham ityasau. Soham, that I am. I am he. That bhavana bida. So bhavana, which is abhida, thought which is, there is no differences. Pavani mata. Pavani is sacred. Mata is thought again. So better than viewing him as the other, indeed, the noblest attitude of all is viewing him as the I within, the Aham Brahmasmi. So, in this verse, Ramana Maharishi is continuing to talk about Upasana. As I mentioned, we will come to the Advaita Jnanam after verse 14. Right now, we're still in Upasana. So, in the previous verse, we talked about Upasana, especially in the mantra based meditation, where you are using an object, an alambanam, which is outside you. So you're using a mantra or Ishtadevata, something which is outside you. But as a Vedantian, you're still keeping, even if you're chanting Om Namah Shivaya, excuse me, even if you're chanting Om Namah Shivaya and you're invoking Lord Shiva, at the back of your mind, as a Vedantian, you must always know that this Lord Shiva, that who is my Ishtadevata, that I'm invoking, is none other than one manifestation of Brahman itself. It's one aspect of this infinite, absolute consciousness. And while I am invoking Lord Shiva, that's who is represented by Lord Shiva for me. And so in the previous kind of upasana, your alambanam was Lord Shiva. And now this verse is telling you to move that alambanam inside. So invoke this Brahman on yourself. Right? So you could do this by just like you used a murti or a lingam and invoking Brahman on that. Now do it inside. So they say in Shastra that the heart, the mind is basically is really where the heart is, physically. That's the physical location of the manas. So you can visualize the heart and invoke Brahman there. In some other places in the Shastra, it will also say to invoke it on a thumb or something. But the ideal is what Shankaracharya tells us to do is invoke it in the heart center. So Shankaracharya says that when the body is cut, you can actually see it. So we know he's talking about the physical heart. And why do we do this? Why do we move from an external deity to invoking this on yourself? And I'm not saying everyone should do it now. This should happen at some stage of your journey when you feel you want to start doing it. You can also do it parallelly, not in the same sitting, but in the same point in your life. You can be using mantra based meditation. You could be doing Ishtadevata Puja, but you could also move to invoking this on yourself. This is because if your devotion remains to the external, right? You try to recognize all these beautiful attributes in Ishvara. And as we talked about in the previous verses, we also we said the best form of puja is Vishwarupa Darshanam, Vishwarupa Seva, which is serving the whole of existence as Ishvara itself. So slowly we are building the capacity of our mind to see the divine in everything in nature, all people, all animals, all of creation itself. And while you do this, it's important not to forget yourself, otherwise you see the divinity all around, but you might think, I am a useless person. I have all these faults. So that's not going to help you move towards this Abheda view, towards this vision of non duality. So it is important at some stage to also do this kind of upasana to invoke and appreciate the divinity which exists in this temple of a body as well. Yeah. And as I said, we're still talking about non-dual upasana. We're not yet talking about non-dual jnanam. We're not talking about Abheda Jnanam yet, the Advaita Jnanam. So Ramana Maharishi is telling us in this verse that this kind of upasana is better than Saguna upasana. Both are necessary, Saguna upasana, which we talked about in the previous verse, and this kind of upasana, to gain the necessary qualifications, to gain the necessary chitta ekagrata. Yeah. And this is also known as Soham upasana. So you can visualize the heart, you can use the support of Soham mantra to invoke it. And some people meditate on Lord Krishna says in chapter 12 on the Aksharam Brahma, which is the Om. And in this kind of upasana, now you're no longer concentrating on the sound, you're concentrating more on the meaning of what that really means. And for us to really be able to do that, you would have had to have some amount of Shravanam. While we are not yet talking about the whole Advaita Jnanam yet, but you need to have sufficient amount of Shravanam to know what kind of qualities to invoke, qualities for the lack of better word. In chapter 12, for example, it says Brahman is avyaktam. It is not perceptible to any of the five sense organs. So everything else we can really think about is perceptible to one of the sense organs, right? The sight, touch, and so on. But Brahman is not perceptible to any of these. Brahman, myself, is achintyam. It cannot be thought of. Generally, when you think of something, it is something that is also perceptible to the senses, right? It's really funny. So we're using this language. Now I'm stringing together these set of random words which have no inherent meaning whatsoever. Yet you're listening to these words and the meaning, some meaning is being conveyed. That's the paradox. It's it's in this way that we do talk about Brahman. We are using words to describe something which is indescribable. And even more amazing is the one who is listening, the sadhaka, understands this this Brahman, which is indescribable, and comes to realize it also. So it's a beautiful paradox of Vedanta and Shastric teaching. So it's achintyam, something which cannot be thought about, which is not available to the mind. And adishdeshyam cannot be spoken of. Sarvartagama, which is all pervading. It is hence not subject to arrival and departure. Brahman is not in this room or outside this room. It's pervading everything. And is achalam, it's immovable. It is kutastam, free from any kind of modifications. So free from the shadvikara, the changes that the body goes through, like coming into, so coming into manifestation in the time of becoming a fetus, then birth, growth, uh, modifications, decay, and eventually death. So it is not subject to any of this. And it is dhruvam, it is eternal. So such an Ishvara has to be imagined and invoked on yourself. And like I said, if you've been exposed to sufficient amount of Shastra, you will know what are the things to invoke on, and otherwise, till such time, you can wait. And this is how you do this kind of Abeda Upasana that Ramana Maharishi is talking about. And the first kind of Upasana we talked about is very important before you feel you can come to this, because otherwise it can become mood making. So you can say, I'm eternal, I'm all pervading, but these are merely words, and you can imagine some kind of feeling around it, with some mood around it. But if the mind is not sufficiently purified, these are just words, and they won't percolate any deeper. Any question on that? Okay, then we come to a very interesting verse 9. Bhavashunya sad bhavastu sthitihi
भाव शून्य सद भाव सुस्थिति
bhavana balad bhaktiruttama.
भावना बला भक्तिरुत्तमा.
Thank you. And So it says bhava shunya, which is upasana without any division, sadbhava. So sadbhava is the abheda chintanam, invoking of the Lord on yourself, visualization of the Lord on yourself, sustiti, absorbed. So that upasana without the division of upasaka and upasyam. So the Lord and devotee is not there. So that's the kind of upasana that this verse is talking about. And how is that achieved? Bhavana balat. Achieved through strength of deliberate practice for long period of time. And then it says, this is Bhakti Uttama. This is the highest state of bhakti. So we're talking about upasana bhakti here. This is the higher state of upasana bhakti. So the best devotion is abidance in one's own self. In Yoga Sutra, this is referred to as Nirvikalpa Samadhi, where there is no division of the meditator, meditation, or the object of meditation, the Tripurti. So that is technically called dharana, dhyana, and dhyeya. Sorry. Yeah. This is the meditator, meditation, and object of meditation. When it is evident, this Triputi is evident, it's called Savikalpa Samadhi. And when one is completely absorbed in meditation, but the division is still perceptible. But how do we get here? We get here through practice. So we really only have control where our willpower can be exercised is in the first step of dharana. And that is concentration. That is, you can invoke a mantra and you can try to keep your attention on the mantra. And whenever the mind wanders, you bring the attention gently back to that mantra. So in this is dharana and concentration. There is effort, willpower, which is in constant use to keep the focus of the mind on the object of meditation. And when dharana becomes dhyanam, meditation, is when this effort, this deliberate effort to bring back the mind has then disappeared. Right? And that is why they say meditation is a happening. So you start with dharana, concentration, but the meditation itself will happen. And how will it happen? After you've done this practice for a sufficiently long period of time. Sometimes people find that they get initiated into meditation and immediately they are able to achieve very high levels of absorption. That simply means that the spiritual journey continues across lifetimes, right? So they have put in the effort in previous lifetimes. So the fruits of those efforts are not lost. So there is no point comparing yourself with someone else. It is highly advised to not discuss any experiences you have in meditation with someone else, except maybe your teacher or spiritual mentor or someone who initiated you into meditation, right? Or someone who belongs to the same sampradaya, who's qualified to initiate you into meditation. So you can only ideally, you should only discuss any experiences you have in meditation with this teacher, and you should not be discussing your meditative experiences with peers. And otherwise, there is a scope for a lot of confusion which can happen. And why is that this sufficiently long period of practice in dharana is required to get to dhyanam? So let's look at how our thoughts operate. Any thought you have, how long does it last? Hardly a moment. It's a very momentary passing thing, each thought that we have. Now, say I want to, because where we are trying to reach through all this upasana is the capacity to do nididhyasana, right? The capacity to meditate on myself. And so say I just want to think about this tree, for example, which is outside, or you want to think about Lord Ganesha, right? So that's why we use again dhyana shlokas you could use. So you would think about the long trunk, the ears, Lord Ganesha's belly, the rat, which is his vehicle, what he's holding in the hands, and so on. So these are all different thoughts, different sequential thoughts, but they are related. They're all about Lord Ganesha, right? So that is called Sajatiya Pratyaya Pravaha, which means Jatiya is similar, Pratyaya is thought, Pravaha is the flow. So the flow of similar thoughts, each dealing with the same subject, is the flow that Ramana Maharishi is talking about in this verse. And for this to happen in an absorbed state, so when now I right now thought about Lord Ganesha, I used my willpower to recall, right, these various attributes of Lord Ganesha, to invoke these thoughts. But how does the same thing happen in an absorbed state? So any vritti, thought, which takes place without any effort is called a sukshma vritti. It's basically a subtle thought. And how does that happen? Like, think if you chanted, if you've either been to a satsang somewhere where they were chanting a mantra, like say Om Namah Shivaya, for 1 hour straight, or you're sitting by yourself and you're chanting Om Namah Shivaya for one whole hour, then you get up from that practice and you're doing something else. You're making yourself a tea, or you're cleaning up, and that mantra will probably still be playing in your head, right? You're no longer deliberately trying to say the mantra in your mind. You're doing some other activity, but the mantra is playing in the background. That's because there's been sufficient practice. This is kind of the immediate effect of if you just sat down for a 1 hour. But when you constantly train your mind over the months, over the years, to have this capacity to be absorbed, then it comes into your subtle thoughts, right? So after you've been exposed to sufficient amount of shravanam, you've permeated all your thoughts with these divine thoughts of myself, Brahman. Whenever you're absorbed, that's where your mind will automatically go. So once you build this capacity of the mind through Upasana to be absorbed, um, then it will go to the thoughts which is most prominent there, right? So so you can be doing both. You can do this Upasana to build this Chitta Ekagrata capacity of the mind, and or you can and you can parallelly be doing all this Shravanam Mananam, so that any states of high absorption you reach will be useful to assimilate the jnanam. In certain lineages, this state of nirvikalpa samadhi, they mistakenly think of this as liberation itself, right? There, because the differences have all disappeared. There is no difference. As they think of this as samadhi. Advaita does not agree with that at all. Advaita says the state is very useful for assimilation of knowledge, but it is not liberation. Thinking that's liberation is creating even more duality. Because that's why then you have these frustrated yogis who every time they break out from samadhi, they think it's a failure. In Advaita, we are trying to realize that everything, every living experience I have is an experience of myself. It's only possible because of myself. So whether I'm in samadhi, whether I'm in deep sleep, or I'm in the waking state right now, I am that absolute consciousness. I don't need to be in a particular state to be that absolute consciousness. Um, but mostly in the waking state, what's happening? I'm perceiving something, right? So there is always objects in my vision. So most of the time, I'm aware more of the objects than the subject. How many of our thoughts are usually on the subject? Hardly ever. Mostly we are occupied with thoughts about the objects. And we are saying that Brahman is not the object, it's the subject itself. And it cannot be actually even be thought about or spoken about. What we are trying to gain is more of this awareness of the subject. So the different levels of yogic practices which one can achieve. So from dharana to dhyanam to savilkalpa samadhi to nirvikalpa samadhi, what's happening here? You're increasing the awareness of the subject, and the awareness of the object is getting reduced. So right now you see this hand. So you're aware of the hand, but you're not aware of the light because of which you see this hand, right? So right now we're having this conversation. We're seeing all these things around, but we are not aware of the substratum because of which all this experience is possible. And when you do these yogic practices to build the capacity for absorption, that's what you're building. You're building your capacity to be more aware of the subject. Does that make sense? Any questions? So all this will also start making more sense when you start having a regular meditation practice. It's wonderful that um, all of you, I see most of the names here are very dedicated Vedanta students who've been with us for several months, years, attend all the classes. And sometimes it's good to do these and come back to these introductory texts to remember that these preliminary practices are very, very important. For sure, Jnanam is the only thing which will liberate you, but that Jnanam will only work if there is sufficient Chitta Shuddhi. So we cannot ignore any of the preparatory practices which are required to develop this Chitta Shuddhi. And so I was saying that what's happening when I gave that example of that chanting, and it it goes more and more into the subconscious. So what happens when you do a meditation, when you're chanting a mantra, at some point you would have find that that mantra has become subtler and subtler, right? And it will become softer at some times. Not in every sitting, but many of the times, if you're getting more absorbed, that's what will happen. It'll become subtler, softer. Now you cannot fake it. You cannot try to intentionally try to make it subtler or softer. It will naturally happen. Just like your breath, when you're more and more relaxed, now, when you're very engaged, your breath is very shallow and fast, right? But once you start doing more pranayama, even if you this, it'll become softer and gentler, and which is the natural state of the breath when you're relaxed and the mind is not very active anyway. So you can also build it through the breath, which we will talk about in later verses. And so the same with any thoughts. So if mantra is the thought we're talking about now, initially it's at a very gross level, even when you start saying it in your mind. And then it'll become subtler and subtler as it's going into deeper layers of your subconscious. And this sukshma riddhi of who I am is always there. So there is this thought of I am is always there, which is why whether you're in deep sleep, you can wake up and say, I was sleeping, right? There is only one more Sukshma Vritti in deep sleep, which is I am not perceiving anything. This thought, Sukshma Vritti of blankness, which is also why when you wake up, you're able to say, uh, I was dead to the world. I don't remember anything. Similarly, this Sukshmavritti of I am is there in all your states, your deep sleep state, your dreaming state, and your waking state. It is there through all stages of life, which is why you can talk about when I was that 3-year-old and I had this popsicle, or I was this teenager in high school, or I was this young executive working in an office. You're not really there in the sense of this, your body was constantly changing, your mind was constantly changing, the intellect was constantly evolving. But that very subtle I am thought was always there, which is why you're able to say I am, right? And this state of sukshma vritti continuing is called nirvikalpa samadhi. So in Yoga Sutras, they will say the Triputi of the meditator, the process of meditation, and the object of meditation has disappeared. But in Vedanta, we say that it is there, but it is not perceived. Just like in a glass of water, if you mix sugar, right, you mix it really well, it disappears and you can no longer see the sugar. But if you taste the water, it's sweet. because the sugar is there, but it's not perceivable. So that's the Vedantic understanding, that the Tripuri is simply not manifest anymore. And this Ramana Maharishi is calling Sadbhavana. So again, reminder, in this verse, we are still talking about Abheda Upasana, which is, Abheda means without any differentiation. And it is different from Abheda Jnanam, which we will come to later. And it is more a visualization of I am the Lord versus contemplation on the teaching of Shastram. There is no self-inquiry here. There is more, that self-inquiry happens under the guidance of a teacher of a lineage, as you know, which is what leads to the Aham Brahmasmi thought. Right now, this is all upasanas, all preparatory practices to prepare us to receive this jnana. So we have just a few minutes left, so I won't start the next verse. So I can take any questions about these couple of verses if there are, or we can also take general questions. Okay. No questions? No general questions about your practice or any of the preparatory practices talked about so far? Okay, and we can end the class for today. Om Purnamadah Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Hari Om. Om Tat Sat. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, Prabhu.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Pallavi.